I feel the reason that we're here on planet Earth is to find our way back home to our hearts. So it's a journey that we're taking to nowhere, but at the same time, it's an exploration that takes us on this wild, magical and mystical twist and turn of events that leads us to this kind of like ocean of magic and alchemy and consciousness, which is our heart. And the feeling of being on that frequency of love is so powerful. And when you feel it and you are it and you just become it and live it, you're literally just sending this kind of tsunami of love and high frequency energy out into the world, and it affects your sisters and brothers, and the frequency of other people starts to rise just from them being around you. So if we can empower multiple souls on this planet, then all of that love just kind of raises up, and then it's like an explosion.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Jerry Sargeant on the show with us today. Jerry's a healer who merges energy, frequency, quantum physics, visualization, and intention to help his clients. Since energy healing is one of my favorite things to do, you know I'm going to have a lot of questions about Jerry's techniques and experiences. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go chat with Jerry. Jerry, I'm so thrilled to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie. It's an honor, pleasure.
Oh, goodness. It's my honor. You talk about elevating global vibration and sending a galactic force of love into universal consciousness. What's that mean? What's all that mean? Can you translate it for us?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the reason that we're here on planet Earth is to find our way back home. And that's to find our way back home to our hearts, and to realize once we get there that we were never really gone in the first place. So it's a journey that we're taking to nowhere, but at the same time, it's an exploration that takes us on this wild, magical and mystical twist and turn of events that leads us to this kind of like pool, or this ocean of magic and alchemy and consciousness, which is our heart. And, you know, there's so many layers and bits and pieces that get in the way, but once you get there, you know, the feeling of being on that frequency of love is so powerful. And when you feel it and you are it and you just become it and live it, you're literally just sending this kind of tsunami of love and high frequency energy out into the world, and it affects your sisters and brothers, and the frequency of other people starts to rise just from them being around you. So if we can empower multiple souls on this planet, then all of that love just kind of raises up, and then it's like an explosion. So like I just want to empower people, help people realize that they don't need anyone else to save them. They don't need anyone else to help them. They don't need pharmaceutical drugs. They don't need anything. Everything's inside of themselves, and this love frequency is the catalyst for colossal change on a personal level, on a global level, on a galactic level, on a universal level.
Do you think that it took us till this time in history to be able to reach that vibrational level, or do you think it's always been accessible, we just didn't know about it? Or perhaps people did know about it and it just, you know, stayed in certain cultures and in certain parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think we used to always have it at one point. If you go back through our kind of history on planet Earth, we were much more activated at one point. You know, I mean, Earth's history is completely false, the stuff that we get taught in the history books. And if you kind of go back through our kind of earthly history, there was a point in time when we were much more activated, much more connected to the source. But over millions of years and through many different processes, we've kind of been downregulated as humans. And so we've become separated through religion and many other kind of facets of reality, and the way that they've introduced all these different things into society over the course of our history to separate us. And there are definitely cultures around the planet. I mean, if you go to some of these African cultures, you know, if someone does something wrong in the tribe or they do something that isn't too cool, they all get in a circle, open their hearts and tell them how amazing they are. They don't judge them and blame them. They just know that love is the answer to kind of bringing them back on track. Whereas you get into this kind of Western world and people are like, blame him, blame her, she's this, she's that. And everybody blames and judges, which creates more separation instead of unity consciousness. So it's definitely always been there. There's just been so many programs that have been instilled into us through the educational system, different methods and modes of kind of control and separation and fragmentation, but it's always been there. Like our heart is the magic, and no one's ever taken our heart away from us. And we've got our physical beating heart, but also that portal, that labyrinth, that stargate that connects us to the whole universe, and that's always accessible. It's just that we're not taught how to kind of be there. Like I always say, like, imagine if you taught children how to read their own body. Like the body's a communication device, and every single injury, illness, or disease means something emotionally. So if we taught our kids how to read the body as soon as they went to school, then there would be no illness, there would be no big pharma, there would be no like chaos and mayhem in terms of illness and disease. But healthy people don't make money, so they don't want us to be healthy. And imagine if they taught us at school how to breathe properly. Imagine if they taught us how to breathe properly and live from that sacred present state of awareness. Like everything would be different because there'll be so much space between us and our external environment. But we're taught to be in this kind of left male brain, which is very logical and limited, instead of being in the right hemisphere, the female brain, which is expansive, which feels and knows and sees code and frequency. You know, the male brain's quite, you know, rubbish, you know, compared to the female brain. And the heart and the right brain, the female brain, when you connect those two things together, magic happens. I mean, in our trainings, we always teach people, get into your heart and travel from your heart up into your right brain, and then go and perceive reality. You'll see it from that expensive, feminine, emotional way of being, and it opens up an infinity of possibility. You see the truth. When you're in the left brain, you see a limited view of society and reality, and it's very structured, and it keeps us confined in boxes. And for me, that's dangerous. So, yeah.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. I got about 50 questions of what you just said. First being, I love that you're talking about how the ancient cultures were connected to their own divinity, their own spirit, way more so than we are today, just because it's been taught out of us, let's face it. And certainly you're in Wales, for God's sakes. I mean, that whole Wales, UK, Scotland, Ireland, those areas are so magical with the Celts and the Druids and, you know, all that culture and all that mysticism it's still feel, you know, you can still feel it. I was just in Ireland last month and you can feel that there. It permeates the society. So when do you think and why do you think we had it taught out of us? Was it just a control thing with religions and with civilizations and cultures?
I mean, when is one question and why is another question. I mean, the when part of it is a long time ago. And it's been kind of done in stages. Like whenever a society is dismantled and controlled and fragmented, it's never like one fell swoop that just kind of washes through. It's done in stages over time. And even if you just look back over the last sort of 15 years, the way that technology's come into play, you know, I mean, when I was a kid, I'm 46 now. If I go back to when I was like 12, 13 years old, you know, we're only just getting mobile telephones. It was like a mad, luxurious thing that was just amazing. And, you know, nobody really had one. And now everybody's on them. And through technology, it's an amazing thing because we get to do stuff like this, which is beautiful. But it's also something that's really kind of tearing humanity apart. I mean, men are getting addicted to pornography and they're becoming keyboard warriors instead of going out into the woods and hunting and doing all those kind of things we used to do. So it's kind of like changing people in that way. If you go back hundreds and thousands of years, there's been many, many wars. And if you go back millions of years, there's been multiple wars even further back. And dark and light has always played a big role on this planet. And so you've got lots of interdimensional entities, higher forces at work, like higher, darker forces that have wanted to use humanity as a slave race. And, our gene code has been spliced and cloned and played around with. We used to be 12-strand angelic humanoids that used to have 6 digits on each finger and 6 digits on each, on each hand and each foot. We used to be massive. Our pineal glands were bigger. We had Merkaba fields that enabled us to bilocate and use them for multidimensional purposes. And all of that stuff was kind of stripped away from us. And now we're starting to remember some of this stuff. We came to planet Earth to be Stargate Guardians. We came here to be able to operate the Stargates and to travel intra-multidimensionally. But other beings that were a lot more powerful came to this planet and stripped us down and tore us apart. And actually, if you go back even further, it happened on other planets before we even came to Earth. But this is a whole kind of other story, going back to our galactic lineages. Why did they do it? Is because when a species is separate, then you can control them. Like, we're so powerful as a species, and if we all came together and unified, then we could break all of the systems down, literally overnight. If we introduced plant medicine, magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, if we taught people how to breathe, exercise, look after themselves on a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level, and we all came together realizing that beyond these physical forms, we're light, we're energy, we're frequency, we could connect on that level. And if we connected on that level, we wouldn't hate each other. There would be no arguments, no separation, no kind of BS stuff going on, and we'd be able to kind of really alchemize as a human species. That's why our logo and motto is one love, one heart, one human family, because when you connect through that one love frequency, you really ignite that human family, that kind of that global community where we can really kind of make huge changes. Now, if you've got religion in place, people pick sides, people pick different religions. You got sports teams, people pick different sports teams. There's separation all over the place. I'm not saying that sports is bad, because I love sports. I love boxing. I love combat sports. I love rugby. I love that sporting element. But when you've got all of these, the humans that support it picking different sides, that creates separation. So like the kind of gladiatorial kind of coliseum of life where people are kind of against each other in combat, I think it's a beautiful thing, because combat is probably one of the ultimate spiritual dances. Going into combat situations like boxing or Muay Thai or MMA, which I wholeheartedly love and have trained in for a long time, going up against another man or a woman going up against a woman in that kind of arena, you get to learn so much about yourself. You overcome so many fears. You get to really understand your levels as a human. But then it comes to like fighting and combat for other reasons, like, war. Going into a country and dismantling them to take their land or their gold or whatever it is. I mean, there's all those sides to war and combat too, which I don't agree with. So there's good and there's not so good in all situations. But when you have these sides that, like, you've got, 20,000 people supporting this football team, 20,000 people supporting that football team, there's separation. So there's separation on all these different levels. There's separation when it comes to money, class, color, language. Like, there's just separation all around the place. And when human beings can't communicate and connect because they think that they've got to connect with this kind of logic that we've been taught, like we need to speak with each other. But if you go to Spain and you don't speak Spanish, you can't communicate with those people on that one logical level. If we come from the heart, I could go to any country around the world, sit in the same space with a Nigerian or a Spanish person or a Brazilian person and just be like, yeah, we really understand each other because we're just staring into each other's eyes and feeling each other's energy. And you get to understand each other on that level. But they've taken us away from that. And that's why I'm saying, if we brought that back into education and taught our children this stuff, we'd be able to connect at such a deep level and the whole of humanity would unify. But They don't want that, because if everybody's together with the same consciousness, with the same like ideas of how the world should be, which is love, strength, honor, respect, abundance, which is what every human being should be living with, these amazing values, then they wouldn't be able to control us. We'd be too powerful. So they do this to separate us and disconnect us so that they can literally take control and enforce things like the tax system, like the educational system, which is just completely corrupt.
All right. So that's a lot to unpack too. A couple of questions along those lines. First of all, I've read research that shows that, back to the sports teams, that, yes, there's a competition there, but in the competition, it really joins the fans of that team. And it's not so much about who wins and who loses. Certainly that's important, but it's more about the camaraderie and the, wearing your team's colors and cheering for your team and going to the games and stuff like that. So my question along those lines has to do with, does the separation help us come together, maybe in a backdoor way, in that we can join together and realize that we are less separate than what we think, even if we're within our own tribe? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And there's both. Like, every single element of reality is duality. There's cold, there's up, there's down, there's friendship and kindness, and there's hate and anger. It's all at play all of the time. And like, what we have to do as humans is to make the choice. And to make the choice to either choose the high frequency road, which is, love, camaraderie, kindness, compassion, strength, accountability, and not choose the road of fear and all of those low frequency options.
Right. And my viewpoint on this is, we need that duality, because if everything was just hunky all the time, we wouldn't have the incentive to create. And create what? Well, create what we want when we understand what we don't want. And I've heard from Spirit a bazillion times, Jerry, that in the spirit world, there's no right or wrong, there's no good or bad. It's just an experience. And we choose to incarnate on Earth so that our spirits can grow and expand. And how that happens is through that duality, through realizing, okay, this isn't what I want, so I'm going to create what I do want. And I think we're talking about the same thing on that. Back to the kids and back to education, you say if we taught our kids how to pay attention to how it feels, that it would really put them on a trajectory, my word, for them living perhaps a more joyful, healthy life. And I'd love to hear more about that from you. I think that what I believe and what I teach is that our feelings are an internal GPS system that guides us. And we're taught to intellectualize things more than to pay attention to how it feels. We all have experienced, and we know many, many people who say, I had a gut feeling about that and I didn't follow it because it didn't make sense to me, and I wish I had. So can you say more about that, about the gut feeling and how to teach kids how to do that?
I mean, like, the amount of times that I've done things in my life and thought, man, I should have listened to my gut. I should have listened to my intuition. And I've gone down this other road and it's taken me through a whole heap of pain. At the same time, coming back to this kind of duality again, the whole heap of pain, I learned so much. I grew in that situation. So maybe I was supposed to go down that road and experience the pain. And really, it was actually the best choice to not listen to my intuition. Like, I think, like, we have this kind of like story, and it boggles my mind when I think about this. But like, the story, imagine if the story is pre-scripted. Okay, so I get up in the morning and I walk out of my front door and I turn left. And I go on this journey, and whatever happens on the day because I went left is what happens. But I could have gone out my front door and thought, should I go left? Should I go right? Should I go left? You know what? I'm going to go left today. So I go left, and I think I've made that decision. But if the story was already pre-scripted, I was always going to go left anyway. And so, sometimes we listen to our intuition and sometimes we don't listen to our intuition. And like you were just saying a minute ago, there is no right and wrong. So maybe when you do listen to your intuition, that was the way you were supposed to go. And when you didn't, maybe you were supposed to go that way. We're never really going to know. But ultimately, we just flow. And if you can kind of frame reality from the perspective of, well, this is happening to me right now and it's unfolding in my space, let me grow from this as much as possible. Whether I'm growing in a space that's tough and hard and ruthless and brutal, or a state of expansion and elevation. And so for me, it's about just being present. If we're present, we've got this God spark, this divine spark in our heart. It's in every cell in our body. Like we all came from this kind of spark of divinity. And when you're really still and you're really present, that soft voice is always communicating with you. And if you listen to it, it never sees you wrong. When you don't listen to that soft voice and you take another road, then often it becomes more painful. Sometimes when you listen to that soft voice, it's painful because you had to go down that road and go through those painful things. Because if you didn't go through those things, when you got 200 meters or a mile down the road, you were going to have an experience. And if you didn't have that painful experience where you grew and you became more resilient, you wouldn't have the tools to and the mindset and the heart set to deal with whatever was further on down the line. So ultimately, it's all perfect. And I think also just coming back to what you were saying about like there's no good and bad, for example, like duality, like contrast is so important. Because if you don't have contrast, you don't know where you are. Like you can be wrapped up in love and light, and it's like, well, you get lost in that. And so you have to go out and experience a bit of pain to realize, actually, I do want to be here. Like I always think it's like a pendulum, and the pendulum is still. And every now and again, the pendulum swings out, and you experience it. Nah, I don't like it. Then you come back to the 0 point. I think when I started my spiritual journey like 20 odd years ago, my pendulum was like this, swinging massively. And it slowly came into the center. And so I found that space of alignment. But then you get lost in that alignment because there was no contrast. So then you make some choices to go and maybe you go and have some crappy food, or you go and experience something that isn't great for your health. And you're like, nah, that isn't where I want to be. But you had to experience it a few times to realize it's where you didn't want to be. So the contrast and the duality is absolutely imperative for us to working out where we want to be. And it just comes back to, again, there's no good, there's no bad. And even the things we're talking about, like with the football teams, against each other, that's a beautiful thing if you look at the whole big picture. Everything's beautiful if you are able to be present and frame it from that perspective and look at the whole big picture. Nothing's really out of place. And even when you look at some of the atrocities that are on the planet, war, different things like genocide, it's like, wow, that's not cool. But if there wasn't that level of genocide or that level of war, it wouldn't shock humanity into that space where the pendulum comes back into the center. Like we're motivated by pleasure and pain. And if we don't experience enough pain, we don't get motivated to move towards the pleasure. So sometimes it has to be really bad in us to hit rock bottom, as individuals, as a community, as a society, as a whole global community, for us to say, no, we need to take a different course of action. And I think that's what's happening on planet Earth at the moment. And even if you look at COVID, what happened a few years ago, so many people realigned where they were and they rebalanced themselves. Like where we are in Wales, the property prices have gone up, and so many people are moving from London out here into Wales because they're like, I don't need to be in the city anymore, running around in this rat race with these crazy prices and extortionate, food prices, house prices, all of this stuff. I could sell up, go to the country and get a house like 5 times bigger, have another, £2-3 million in the bank, whatever it is, and be free from all the stress and all the 5G towers and all the stuff that's going on in the city. So people have reevaluated and they've used this kind of like what was planned as being something completely destructive and negative has helped so many people escape the matrix. At the same time, it crushed a lot of people and a lot of people died. But again, it's the balance. It's the balance.
Right. Well, and a couple of thoughts along those lines too, with regard to the football games, and everybody's got their own team and the team for whom they're cheering. But when somebody gets hurt, what happens? Everybody in the stands cheers when the person gets up and walks off the field, hopefully. Or if, God forbid, they're on a cart and they're being driven off the field, the whole crowd comes together and cheers for that person. And I think that's what it's all about, is we all really want what's best for each other. And we get lost, to your point, the pendulum swing, I think, is a great analogy. We get lost in our own personal dramas. But at the end of the day, every culture wants the same thing. Every human wants the same thing for themselves and their family and their loved ones.
Yeah, I've just done this. I remember in, I think it was like 2004, 2005, I was in Africa and I was with a friend of mine and we went over there. It was a whole different world for my spiritual journey. But I went over there to do a property deal. And me and my friends, like, this is when I used to drink and stuff. We had a few drinks and we went out and we were walking around the streets and we walked down this kind of road, and there were a load of guys. They had AKs slung over their shoulders. They were all drinking, singing songs. They had like those oil drums, fires. And we walked down the road and they were like, they just came and chatted to us. They gave us a bottle of beer. We sat there, chatted to them. And like, a lot of people would think, well, I better not walk down that road, that might be quite dangerous. And the way that it's kind of like presented to us is that if you go to these different countries, it's dangerous. You've got to watch yourself. But I've traveled so much, and everywhere I go, people just want to love you. People just want to talk to you. Where are you from? Come and eat our food. Come and try our cuisine. Like, and I've been to some crazy places, and I know there are some things on this planet that aren't good, and there are some dangerous places. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there aren't, but most humans, like everyday people, they don't want to fight. They don't want to go to war. They just want to love and be kind and hug you and get to know you. And if you go to another country and someone doesn't speak your language, you can really connect with that person. If you just sit around them and just laugh, you can communicate with gestures, you can always find a way. And everybody wants that. Everybody wants that unity. If you look into someone's eyes, you see that we're all just the same. We're like frequency. We're just souls in these human bodies that all originate from the same fabric.
Right. I agree. Back to, how do we teach children and therefore ourselves, as we're teaching the kids, we're learning it too. How do we do that? How do you teach a child to pay attention to their feelings and to not negate the intellectual part of the equation, but certainly have a balance between how does it feel and what do you think about a situation? How do you do that?
Best thing you can do for your children is be a role model. Like just whatever it is that you think is the best for yourself and for all humans, that you'd want to be impeccable versions of themselves. And if you continue to instill that, and that frequency and that code flows out from you into the space, and you live and breathe this stuff, then, and if you're around them, then they're going to pick up on it and eventually kind of find their way. So I think being a role model is the best thing. Every now and again, chuck in plant a few seeds here and there, and hopefully they grow, but trying to kind of make them do something is definitely not the way to do it. It's like, be an inspiration, be a guiding light, and let them figure it out for themselves. I think that's the best piece of advice I can give, but it doesn't work for everybody. But that's how I would, if I had other children, that's what I would do.
Well, we can't control anybody else. We think we can, but we can't control what anybody else thinks. You can be torturing somebody and they're thinking about unicorns and butterflies while you're torturing them, because we can't control anybody else's thoughts, and nobody can control our thoughts either at the end of the day. So I agree with you. I think the role model thing, and when you live with somebody, they have the opportunity to match your vibration. Good segue into, what is your Star Magic program? Tell us about it.
So Star Magic is it's a frequency. When back in 2009, I was meditating in my friend's garden. I met this old guy it was in New Zealand. I moved to New Zealand for a few years between 2009 and 2012. And I met this guy called Mike who taught me how to meditate, and he had a pyramid in his garden, a copper pyramid. I used to go and sit in there every day. We opened up a health and fitness center in New Zealand. That was another catalyst, because we started helping people. And there's all these different kind of things that happen. But I was meditating in the garden, and a little space pod came and landed in the garden. There was a blue being in it. I brought my light out of my body, went and got in it, and we flew through a portal, and we went to Alpha Centauri. I don't know how I knew that, but I just knew we were there, and we walked up this beach, and I met all these blue beings, which were Lyrans, and they took me into this like crystalline pyramid where they downloaded all this code. It was like an orange frequency full of geometry, but it wasn't the kind of geometry you see in the textbooks. It was this fluid, evolving, spiralized geometry. And then when I came back to Earth, nothing happened. And I was like, what's next? Like, come on, I want the next piece of the puzzle. Then 2 years later, I was told we had to move back to England. And Laura, my ex-wife, and the children thought I was nuts because we just moved there, set up business. The kids were loving school out there because it was very free. It wasn't until we came back to England and we started homeschooling them. But anyway, we moved back to England, and I started seeing fairies, angels, and communicating with all these different beings. Then I went to the mystery schools. And when I was in the mystery schools, they showed me how to use the codes that I downloaded. And it's like an extraterrestrial light frequency. And so people started coming into my life that needed healing. And I was just trying this stuff and it was working. So then we started Star Magic, and it became this kind of mission, really. Once we'd started it, the blue being, his name's Derequai, who took me in the spaceship to Alpha Centauri, he came and visited me again and showed me all of these orange lights around the Christ consciousness grid of the planet and said, you need to build these healing centers. So we're in the process of building our first one at the moment. Like everything that the Lyrans have told me to do is happening. And it's wild. I just feel like I'm, I don't know, like a robot just following the instructions, and it's all just kind of taking place.
Well, they're spirit guides. They're spirit guides for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say they're kind of more than spirit guides because I see them. They're right next to me, you know, like they phase into this reality and sit down. These things just blow me away. So the frequency, it works at a super conscious level. Like I always say to people, we're like computer programmers. So like you look at the body, which is like a biological computer, uploading and downloading frequency from past lives, future lives, which are all parallel once you get into the field. There is no kind of past and future, but we're uploading and downloading the frequency and the code from multiple realities that we've experienced or are experiencing in the field. Some of them are detrimental to our kind of growth and health, and some of them really amplify our health. So what we do is we teach people to go into the back end of the computer, into the quantum field, and reprogram, change the code. So when you change the code, the liver cancer disappears, the brain tumor goes, the diverticulitis disappears, the fibromyalgia vanishes. So we're just like computer programmers using these extraterrestrial light codes to reprogram a human's biological computer so they can become physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually free, so they can really become empowered. But ultimately, we don't actually really heal them. This is the thing. Like I always say to everyone, we're not really healers. That's why we call ourselves facilitators, because no one can really heal anybody else. And if you go to the website, you got bundles of testimonials saying, oh, Jerry did this, Jerry did that, or one of the other facilitators did this or that. But really all we did is change the code in the back end of the computer, and then their body entered a state of kind of homeostasis where it recalibrates and realigns and kind of sorts itself out, because the body's designed to self-heal. There's just all these bullshit programs running in the background that stop it happening. So we're just literally changing the code so they can go through their own self-healing process.
I completely agree. I feel like I want to stand up and give you a standing ovation in your point when you said nobody heals anybody else. We all heal ourselves. And you and I are facilitators to help with the frequency that person is matching so that they can heal themselves. Just yesterday, I was working with a client, and she had a growth on her finger near her knuckle, and I worked on it. And then we worked on several other things in her body. I'm like a human MRI. I can see inside the body, like broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, cancer, or whatever. And so we're working on other body parts, and she said, okay, this growth is really shrinking here. While we're talking, I spoke to her for an hour. And it was, I talked to her and her husband, and it was working on him too. And then she emailed me about an hour later. She said, that growth is completely gone. You've healed it. And I said, no, you healed it. It's just a matter of getting her to that frequency where her body would match it, and she didn't have the growth. And the interesting thing about the galaxies far, far away and the other beings from other planets and stuff, earlier this summer on my show, I had a guy who's a buddy of mine named Simon Bound, who does hypnosis. And I'd never been hypnotized before, and he hypnotized me on the show. I forget what the episode is. We'll put it in the show notes. And our question was, where did the healing interest and the healing abilities originate? And it was in a galaxy far, far away that was like, I think I heard it was 500 billion light years away. And that's where the healing frequency, much like what you're talking about with your moving geometrical shapes and things, that's where it was downloaded into me. And then it's been developed like yours has in this lifetime. But everybody has the ability to learn this stuff. Would you agree with that?
Anyone can do it. Accountants, lawyers, firemen, stay-at-home mums. It doesn't matter who you are. I guarantee you can do it. Like anyone can. I mean, if I can turn my life around and be a kid from the streets, selling drugs and doing all sorts of crazy things, and then go on this journey and work out how to do this, anybody can. So for me, there's never any excuse. If people say, I can't do it. Yes, you can. Just listen and just trust the process. I'm going to guide you, and boom. And the magic happens. Like, no way. And then their confidence grows, and then they start practicing on their own, and they get good at it. And I love watching that process. I love it when someone's like, I can't do it. And I've been in trainings where people have said, F this, I'm going home. I can't do this, Jerry. I'm going home, like on day 2 or day 3. I'm like, breathe, just calm down. And then you take them in and guide them, and they heal something or facilitate the healing for someone of something really kind of like terminal illness or something mad kind of bone structure that's out of place. And it just blows me away watching their faces light up when they realize that they've done it, because then they're so empowered then. And then they go out into the world and empower more people, and that's beautiful.
I agree. And when somebody's saying, I can't do this, and this is what I find in my classes as well, people say, I'm never going to be able to do this. I just don't have the talent. And I say, you're in fear. Spirit doesn't communicate on the I feel crappy channels because it's a low vibration, number one. Number two, you can't reach that high frequency that's going to do the healing that needs to flow through you to help this person with whom you're working, because you're in fear. So you got to get out of the fear. You got to change the channel from the low vibration to the high vibration. And it really is amazing. I think that this happens in lots of different modalities and cultures too. I have a dear friend who's a Taoist priest, and he talks about what we were mentioning earlier about once that person gets into the frequency that there's health there, whatever the illness is goes away. And there are a multitude of ways to do that. And some people, like my buddy, he does a healing on somebody from an ancient Chinese standpoint. Well, it's the same frequency that you're using from a galactic standpoint that I'm using from a spiritual standpoint. And I see these wild visions of the healing happening. And sometimes they're really hilarious, Jerry. Like, I may see that somebody's elbow looks like whipped cream, and then there's a healing that happens where the whipped cream starts spinning or something. And I'm describing this crazy stuff, which is hilarious. And it's a way for us to have a human frame of reference for this energy healing that's happening. We're all doing the same things. I think there are a bazillion different ways to do it, but it's all the same result with this. We both train physicians and other medical providers, if you will. I believe that the work that I do on the healing plane and the work that you do as well, and your colleagues and graduates, we're all part of the healing equation to help the person heal themselves. But my question to you on this is, how have you heard from your graduates of your class, how do they integrate this methodology of healing into their normal Western medicine or Eastern medicine practices?
Yeah, I mean, we just had a doctor that we trained, I don't know, 18 months ago. He works for operating on children, and a fascinating guy. And he realized that he didn't need to be cutting people open anymore. So he started applying star magic, and he gave up his medical stuff. He just gave it all up, and all he does now is work with people with star magic, and he's getting better results. Whereas before he'd have to get a scalpel, cut them open, stitch this, fix that, and remove that. Now he's just using star magic. We have chiropractors that come and train with us, and they don't even need to touch their clients anymore, which is kind of a weird thing, because like the clients want to come along and be touched, because they're like, well, I'm paying money, I want to be touched, I need you to bend me. Crack. That's what they're used to. Yeah. So we find that some of our chiropractors are still seeing their clients and touching them and moving them, but doing it in a completely different way, so there's different ways that people are using it. And yeah, I mean, we've got some doctors that use this actually in their surgeries. So they'll go into surgery and use it to speed up the healing process. I remember years ago when we first started Star Magic, because like this kind of like allopathic medicine and what we do, there's definitely, there's a bridge, and I think that there's a space for everything. And I don't think it's like us against them. Again, like for me, I would love to bring everything into this balancing point where we can all work together, because there are some times when you might need an operation. Like I was working with this guy, he was on his push bike, and he was riding his push bike down the road. He was coming up to a roundabout, a car came in front, and he went into it, and his head went through the quarter light window, those little windows, and his neck was broke, his nose was in the back of his back of his head. He was in a bad way. He had some broken ribs and stuff, and all his airways. Anyway, they airlifted him to a hospital in Bristol in England called Frenchy Hospital. And he was Romanian, and his girlfriend was English. Anyway, she phoned me up. I knew her, and she told me what happened to Stefan, and I said, right, I'll come to the hospital. So she had to say that I was his Romanian brother and that I was just flying in. I went down to the hospital. I had to blag it a little bit, got in there. He was in this kind of like glass cubicle so they could monitor him, plugged up to all this stuff. I went in and worked on him for, I don't know, a couple of hours or so. They told him that he'd be in hospital, like, he might not even walk again. He'd be in hospital for a long time. And he was back at work in 5 weeks, And so for me, that was awesome, because if it wasn't for the doctors, he wouldn't have survived. If it wasn't for the air crew and the paramedics on the scene, he'd be dead right there. And if it wasn't for me, maybe he wouldn't have healed properly. Maybe his bones wouldn't have gone back in the right place. Maybe he'd had breathing problems the rest of his life. I don't know. But we worked together and created magic. And so I think if the medical industry could accept healing in, which is starting to do in some places, I see some in hospitals and different things. And, I'd love to get Star Magic into hospitals, because I know that we could really help so many people. Yeah, so I think, again, it's about bridging that gap and working together and not being separate. So I think there are some people that would take these tools and disregard their medical stuff, and there's some people that would take the tools and integrate the two. And that just comes down to personal preference and personal decision and where you're at as a human, I think.
Well, in what our spirit's exploring in this lifetime, I always tell my clients, the healings happened on the energetic level. It's already in place. Now it's going to integrate into your body, and that can happen instantly. It can take days, weeks, months. It may need complementary care like a surgery, but the surgery is going to be a breeze because it's already happened on the energetic level. And I find that so often when people understand it is the merging of all of these different healing modalities, and it's always the person's spirit's prerogative to decide what it wants to use and how it wants to integrate. Because back to what we talked about earlier, nobody can heal anybody else. We all heal ourselves. And I go so far as to say that sometimes the healing is death. Sometimes that person's spirit is saying, okay, I've experienced, explored everything I wanted to this round. I'm going to go back. I'm going to create a new game plan, come back in a reincarnation. And it's just, death is just going into a different state, different reality. It's still the same person. The spirit is still the same. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to?
Just as you were saying that before, you kind of said sometimes it's got to be death. Like I used to always think that I'm going into this healing session to save someone. I'm coming in here to heal them and help them become better. And in my way of thinking that they should be better. And then one day I worked with someone who had like liver cancer, colon cancer, like this beautiful woman. She was about 60 odd years old, been through 2 really awful marriages, been abused. And anyway, we worked for 4 days, like morning, night. I said to her, we've got to really kind of smash this and get into this. And if you're going to survive this, you got to find a way of loving yourself. You know, because, you know, so anyway, we went through this process. Before the last healing session, she turned around to me and she burst into tears and she was like, Jerry, I think I love myself. I know what it means now. So she's had this breakthrough. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, we got a real good chance here. You know, she's going to survive. Anyway, went into the last healing session and she was going through this divorce with this guy. And I went into the healing session. I saw this massive oak tree like hanging out of her chest. So I'm pulling out all the roots and taking it out, and the oak tree was connected to this guy. So I pulled it out, cleared it all up, and I'm saying, is there anything else I need to do? And I'm saying, no, that's it, she's done. And I said, you sure? Yep, she's done. So anyway, I went to sleep, and I woke up about an hour or so later, like boom, I was just awake, and I looked at my phone and I had a message, Rachel's passed back to spirit. And I was like, how could that be possible? You told me that she was okay. And I'm like, you lied to me. I found it really hard to kind of process that. You know, it was the first time it happened. Anyway, I managed to get back to sleep, and I woke up in the morning. I went into meditation. As soon as I went in, she came in spirit. And she said, Jerry, thank you so much. She said, if you didn't help me detach from this guy and help me get to that space where I could overcome my fears and love myself, I wouldn't have been able to come back to spirit and do the real work. She said, I had to come back to the other side. So what you did was perfect. And I was like, it blew me away because it was the first time that had happened to me. And then since then, there's been other times too where we've had to help people cross over. But yeah, you're 100% right. Like sometimes that's our job. And it's challenging sometimes when you've got like a mum and a dad that might have a child with leukemia. And sometimes that child has to pass. Depending on the parent's level of consciousness, you know, you can say to them, this is what had to happen. Sometimes they'll just blame you and judge you because you didn't save them, but you've just got to kind of wear that and take that on the chin. That's just part of what we do, right? So yeah, there's different circumstances, but sometimes, yeah, you've got to help them pass.
I have a friend who grew up in South Africa, and his mom came from a very wealthy family with lots of maids and nannies and butlers and that kind of thing, and really didn't see her parents much. They were traveling the globe doing what, you know, the super rich do, some of them. And she was sent off to boarding school when she was really little and spent her whole childhood either in boarding schools or home with the nannies and the servants. And when she was elderly, she had 2 really bad strokes and she had to have full-time care. So she had 3 caregivers that took care of her at the end of her life. And it's the first time in her life that she ever felt loved. When we talked to her spirit after she passed, she told us that. She said it's the first time in her life she ever felt loved. She wanted to experience that in this lifetime, and then she was ready to go, which I think really parallels on what you're talking about. Last question, why do we incarnate?
Oh, that's a massive question. You know, I mean, there's so many different reasons. Like, Earth is like a training ground. It's like one of the toughest training grounds in the galaxy. You know, we come down here knowing that we're not going to remember why we came here. And when we're up there and we decide to come down, it looks great. Yeah, it's not going to be that tough. But we get here and we don't remember anything. So we've got to go through this whole process of finding our way back home. We're stuck inside a reincarnation cycle where we keep getting brought back down into this body if we don't remember how to exit this matrix. And we have everything kind of stacked against us with this dualistic kind of world and reality field that we live in. So we're stuck into a space where it's really, really tough. But it's also awesome, because if you can navigate your way out of this, you can accomplish anything. And like the way I see it is like there's billions of souls queuing up to come to planet Earth, because it's like going to Harvard University. Everybody wants to go to the best university. Well, all of the souls want to come to the toughest training ground, because once you get through this, you amplify and you become a much more upgraded version of yourself. You remember how to switch from this kind of 2-3 strand DNA template to switch back on that full 12 strand DNA template, which is really 13, but that's another story. But to switch on that kind of full superhuman potential and be able to bilocate, telekinesis, heal, all these different things, like it's natural, it's within us. We've been doing it for billions of years in the stars. So we've come to a training ground knowing that we're going to forget all that stuff so that we can find our way back home and master that process, which is really, really tough, but incredible and massively empowering. Another reason that we come here is because we get to, through this challenging process, deal with all of those energetic patterns that we've put out through multiple incarnations. Some people might call it karma. I don't really like to call it karma, because people think, well, I've done bad, so I need to be punished. It's not really like that. It's just you put out some kind of frequency, and that frequency always finds its way back full circle. So you've got to kind of work through that stuff. We've got ancestral conditioning. We've got past life trauma, future life trauma, all of this stuff running through this biological computer, as well as a whole system that's designed to stop you finding your way back to your heart. So like, it's not easy, but when you manage it and you do it and you find your way back and your consciousness accelerates and expands and you start living from this present state of heart consciousness.
And I think too that when you were talking about we all have the ability, but when we come in, we've forgotten. It's kind of like rebooting your computer. You gotta reboot to find sometimes the programs that have been stalled. And when we reboot, whether that's from some kind of a big catalyst like your car accident or whatever somebody's path is, and it doesn't have to be dramatic and traumatic. It can just be that somebody's following where they're led. Then we have the ability to tap into these skill sets that we are all born with. Well, thank you for the work that you do on behalf of humanity. I am thrilled that you gave up a life as a criminal and you decided to follow your path with this spirituality stuff. I want to have you back and explore more about the geometric patterns and stuff that the star people, downloaded into you and how you utilize that. But what a fascinating guy you are, for heaven's sakes. Charming, eloquent, all of that. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. How can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Julie. It's been a pleasure. People can go to starmagichealing.org and you can get all of our social handles there. You can contact the team, all the trainings, and everything's on there. You can go and get free access to all of our Ascension tools for 7 days. It's at infinity. Go and check it out. Join a free global meditation. Just get in contact with us, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you at some point. And just thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
What a delight. All right, everybody, that's it for today. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from Wales too, where Jerry is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.